converting JavaScript Threejs examples to TypeScript projects. So there are many great Threejs examples on the official Threejs examples website at threejs.org examples. They're written in JavaScript, and you may one day want to convert a Threejs JavaScript project into a TypeScript project. So in this video, I'll demonstrate how I would go about doing that. So I convert the Threejs example Ocean into a TypeScript equivalent of that example. Okay, so this is the official Threejs examples website, and this is the Ocean example, and you can find that by just typing Ocean into the search option there. Okay, so we're going to quickly import this one. So the first thing I'm noticing here is that it's using the stats panel and the DAT.gui panel. So I'm going to start off using my boilerplate that includes both the stats and the DAT.gui's panels. So here are my Threejs TypeScript boilerplate GitHub repository. If you scroll down into the branches section, there is a branch that includes stats and DAT.gui, and that's called the statsgui branch. So what I'll do is clone the boilerplate repository and then check out to the statsgui branch. So go up to the top, copy the HTTPS URL there, so copy that to clipboard. Okay, open up a terminal, switch to a folder or drive that you want to work in. I'm going to use my D drive. I'm going to git clone, right click, so I paste the repository URL in, and I'm going to create a new folder called Ocean, like that. So cloning into Ocean. Okay, so CD Ocean and dir, and that is the boilerplate. So let's open that in code. So code space dot like that, we'll open VS Code with the project being in that folder. So I can close that. Now open a terminal in VS Code, and we'll switch to the statsgui branch. Git checkout statsgui. Okay, switch to the new branch called statsgui. Now most of the Threejs examples that you'll view on this examples website are using the latest version of Threejs. So the first thing you might want to do is update the boilerplate to use the latest version of Threejs. So npm install 3 at latest. Okay, so 3 at 1.31.3. That's what it was at the time of creating this video. We also want to make sure the types are the latest as well. So install types at types 3 at latest. Okay, that is 1.31.0. The versions don't always match. Doesn't matter. We can continue with that. Okay, now just to run npm install generally, just so that we get all the dev dependencies loaded up into our node modules folder just there. Okay, so that's complete. Now let's just start it. Npm run dev and visit that in a browser. And there we go. That's the statsgui branch. Now we're going to use that as our base for creating this in TypeScript. And I've used that because it's got the stats panel and the DAT.gui panel included as well. Okay, so we go stats and DAT.gui. Now let's get the source code for this example. Down the bottom right there, this little icon down here. So just press that. Okay, now we can see the source code. Switch to the raw mode, just like that. And I'm just going to zoom in to that slightly so it's easier to read. Okay, this is the source code for that example, and it's a HTML file, and it includes the JavaScript inside a script type equals module tag. First thing I want to do is copy the JavaScript from this. So copy this whole section, which is inside the script tag there, all the way to the bottom. And copy that. Don't copy the script tags, that's okay. Go into your project, source, client.ts, select all, and delete, and then Control V to paste. Right, so we're getting a lot of warnings. That's not a problem so far. If you press Shift Alt F, it will auto format the code for you. So everything's now left aligned to the margin. I'm going to press Control S just to save that. Now, since I'm using a bundler and npm, and that is using node module resolution, I need to update these imports to use named module specifiers. So this first one, import all as 3 from here, no longer use the relative URL, we use 3 like that. Now for stats, we import from 3 examples like that. It's also the same for the GUI, orbit controls, water, sky. We also don't use the .js at the end. Okay, now if you remember from my dat.gui video, the types at 3 type definitions repository doesn't contain a definition for dat.gui.module. So in my tsconfig, I created a path for that. So whenever it sees that in my source code, it will use a type definition at that address, which is relative to my tsconfig. Okay, so I installed Types at DAT.gui independently of the project. I've outlined that in the DAT.gui lesson anyway. Okay, going back here. Now, we're getting a lot of red squigglies under these variable names here. So it says variable stats implicitly has type any. Now, the reason why that red squiggly is being drawn at the moment is because in my TS config, I have strict equals true. So you can get rid of that for now and then wait a moment and the red squigglies go. But it's still showing that there's some kind of problem there. So variable stats implicitly has any type, but a better type may be inferred from its usage. Okay, so we'll go through these variables in a moment. First, though, I want to see what happens if I try and run this in the browser so that we can see what errors that we get. So the TypeScript compiler has shown us a whole lot of errors and warnings, but never mind. Let's go and look at it anyway. See what we have. We just refresh this screen and then press F12 to look at the developer console. It says uncaught type error, cannot read property append child of null. So if I click that line there, it's going to show me the line that it says is wrong. So container append child renderer DOM element. Let's find that line in the source code. Okay, so container append child renderer DOM element. Container equals document get element by ID container. So our HTML document needs something called container. If we look at the original source here of the Ocean example on the Threejs repository, in the HTML section or the body, there's a div with an ID container. So we'll copy that and put that in our dist client index HTML, just down there, body div ID container. Now, if we refresh this, the error now is something else, but we're almost there. Now that is the JavaScript version of the code running in TypeScript there. Okay, if we look at client.ts, I haven't made any changes here other than how I did the imports. So that is mostly working, although we are getting some warnings being shown here still, and that these are TypeScript type warnings. So the JavaScript is mostly running. Okay, the next problem I'm going to solve is if I look at the console there, so scroll to the top, we'll look at the first problem. Okay, so get HTTP textures water normals JPEG not found. This error is easier to see if we look at the network tab there. Here we go, water normals 404. So we need this file, waternormals.jpg. This is one of the resources that this example uses. So going to the original version, press F12 to open up developer tools, switch to the network tab. We'll just refresh this example and find the water normals JPEG there. There we go, that's been found. So if you right click that, I'm going to copy the link address, open a new browser, and that's it. That's the file that we need to add to our project. So right click that, save image as, navigate to your project. So I'm on my D drive, Ocean, dist, client. It needs to be in a folder called textures. Create a new folder called textures. Now go into that and save waternormals.jpg like that. Okay, so I knew that folder was called textures there because we can see it's called textures waternormals, and also in the source code, if we find where the texture is loaded, it's looking for textures waternormals. So my project's going to need in dist client a textures folder waternormals like that. So that's what I've just done. Now if I refresh this, there we go, waternormals is now found, and that looks much better. Excellent. Now that's working, but we haven't really made all our code look like TypeScript yet. And we still get some warnings in there, despite the fact that it's actually working. So what I'll do now is convert this to actually being TypeScript since it's in a .ts file. So I personally prefer to have strict equals true on so that the warnings are more prominent. There we go. First one, stats, stats, camera. 3.perspective camera. I know it's a perspective camera because down here where camera is used, it's a new 3 perspective camera. Scene, 3.scene, renderer, 3.webgl renderer. There, I also know that's a WebGL renderer because if I look down here, renderer equals a new 3 WebGL renderer. Okay. Controls, water. Water, I can guess is a type of water there, but just to be sure, I'm going to find out where water is instantiated. I'm going to find that in the document there. So water equals a new water. There we go. So if I go up here, water is a type of water. Sun, let's find out where sun is instantiated. Sun equals a new 3 vector 3. Okay, so that is a type of 3 vector 3. And mesh, let's find out where mesh is instantiated. There's a new 3 mesh there, like that. Okay, very good. So Shift Alt F to format. Okay, so all those variables now have been given a type where the TypeScript compiler wasn't able to infer from its usage. Now, moving on, the rest of the red squigglies, container, if we hover over that, container object is possibly null. So it's an HTML element or null. We know container is a div element there. So because container equals document get element by ID container as HTML div element. Okay, so that red squiggly's gone now. You can use as HTML element if you like, but if you use HTML div element, any future usage of the container variable will give us IntelliSense, which is appropriate for our div element. Very good. Let's move on down to see what else is standing out. So water material uniforms. So uniforms does not exist on type material or material array. The water material is a shader material. So we can do this as 3.shader material. And also often you'll want to put a semicolon in front of those. Whenever you put a bracket like that and then do as a type and close it with a bracket, just so that doesn't cause problems, prepend a semicolon. Okay, so we're no longer getting that error there. Okay, so it knows that our material is a type of 3 shader material. Now, I know this because of experience. You just get better at these things over time. If you were unable to figure out what an actual type was when trying to guess what it is, you can always just use any to remove the red squiggly. So water material as any, but any IntelliSense that you get is not going to work if you use any. So if I use 3 shader material, the IntelliSense is now related to a 3 shader material. Excellent. Okay, sky. From scene needs you to pass in a 3.scene, but sky is a, let's find out where that is instantiated. So sky there is a type of sky. Sky equals a new sky. So sky itself is not a 3.scene. So instead, I'm not sure of the best thing to do there. So I will just do as any like that. Now TypeScript is happy. Okay, let's move on to the next warning. Stats. It says new expression whose target lacks a construct signature implicitly has an any type. The way to resolve that one is I just get rid of the word new. There we go. That works for this particular library because the stats is already created when you import it in this case. Okay. Water uniforms, water material. This one we've done before. So as 3.shader material. Excellent. And this one again, water as 3.shader material. Okay, so we're getting some weird squigglies here that don't make much sense. That's because I don't have the semicolon at the front. There we go. Because it wasn't able to work out where the start and the end of this line was without it. I'm just putting that there. Excellent. Now, there are no more red squigglies in that source code. If I just Control C that to stop it and npm run dev again so we can look at the console, it looks much neater. There are no errors showing up in the console or even in the source code. And if I refresh this, it works perfectly. Okay, so when you're trying to create a TypeScript version of a JavaScript project, reading the errors that you see in the console are very useful, and also checking what you get in the network tab when you refresh. Look for 404 errors. You'll be missing resources and your local project will need those. Okay, so just going over that very quickly. I copied the contents of the script tag into my client.ts there. I updated the imports to use module specifiers. I added the div tag that it needed to the document, and I imported the resource which it needed was textures water normals JPEG. Excellent. And then that was working. And then because I wanted to make it more perfect and get rid of all the TypeScript warnings, I went through and added the types to all the variables and added them where it wasn't able to automatically infer them. Excellent. Okay, so there are many other examples on this website that you can have a go at trying to convert. Just remember, as you're doing the conversion, to check the console and the network tab for any missing resources or any extra HTML elements you're going to need to add to your HTML document. Excellent.